2024 is looking like an odd year for PlayStation's perspective because the big, single-player first-party blockbusters that the platform is usually associated with are very noticeably sitting the year out. But though it's true that the likes of Ellie, Jinsakai, Peter Parker, and others are currently MIA on the PlayStation front, others are nonetheless stepping up to fill the void. 2024 is seeing Sony release plenty of relatively smaller first-party games to fill up the PS5's release schedule, and even in that group of so-called smaller games, there's one in particular that's looking like a colossal deal in spite of itself. We are, of course, talking about Astro Bot, the charming, delightful platformer that has captured more than a few hearts since Sony announced it earlier in the year. From his introduction in 2013's The Playroom to his debut in his first full game with the incredible Astro Bot Rescue Mission for PSVR, to the incredible job he did helping ring in a new console generation for Sony with the free pack entitled Astro's Playroom on PS5. The adorable robot platforming mascot has been a fan favorite for about a decade now, and having accumulated tons of fans and goodwill over recent years, it's no surprise that the prospect of the first full-fledged console Astro Bot entry is generating the kind of buzz that it is. Think about it. Back when Astro Bot Rescue Mission first launched for the PSVR back in 2018, it was widely hailed as VR's very own Super Mario 64 moment. Not only was it an incredible platformer in its own right, it was also a spectacular display of what a talented studio could accomplish with even the most limited VR hardware. Then, a couple years later, we got Astro's Playroom, which was a far better game than it had any right to be. Effectively, Astro's Playroom was a free tech demo bundled with every PS5, meant to highlight the DualSense's unique features, but in addition to doing that incredibly well, it also ended up being yet another delightful platformer. And now, Team Asobi and Sony are coming out with a full-fledged console Astro Bot entry? One that isn't going to be restrained by VR or limited in its design, but can instead fully flex its creative muscles as a full-price $60 game? Yeah, there's no surprise that the upcoming Astro Bot is generating that kind of level. Of course, it's worth mentioning that there have been some who have questioned the game's price tag, to which we say that for our money, Astro Bot is looking sufficiently meaty, and then some. Obviously, everyone is going to have to make their own decisions, but whether or not they want to spend $60 on that game, Team Asobi is promising a 12 to 15 hour experience, and has confirmed that it will also receive at least some free post-launch DLC, and has a track record of making great games. With all of that in mind, we'd be shocked to see Astro Bot being anything less than successful. But of course, that's not the only reason. The IP's track record and its developers' knack for making excellent platformers can only take you so far. What's been just as pivotal in turning Astro Bot into one of the most highly anticipated upcoming games of the year for a shocking amount of people is the fact that every tiny little bit that we've seen of it so far has looked genuinely excellent. With over 80 levels across several galaxies, more than 15 abilities to use against a plethora of different enemy types, more than 70 of which will be entirely new, and upwards of 300 bots to rescue, which will also include a bevy of PlayStation cameos and secrets, Astro Bot is making some serious enticing promises. That last one in particular has contributed significantly to the hype around the game, in fact. What we have seen of Astro Bot so far has us fairly confident that it will be able to stand on its own two legs as a great platformer. Or so we're hoping at least, but at the same time, its promise of yet another platforming odyssey that, like Astro's Playroom, will be a celebration of all things PlayStation is also a huge part of the appeal. Team Asobi has said that doesn't necessarily have to be a part of the series' core makeup going forward, but for now, we're more than a little excited at the prospect of Astro Bot not only having cameos and secrets from a plethora of other PlayStation properties, but even full-fledged levels and character appearances, as has been hinted a few times so far. Some, of course, will be disappointed that Astro Bot seems to have moved on from the VR. Even though the series got its first full game on a virtual reality platform, Team Asobi has made it abundantly clear that the upcoming installment is not going to feature PSVR 2 support, since it was designed from the ground up as a console game given how excellent the aforementioned rescue mission was at leveraging the unique advantages of VR gaming. It's understandable that some will be disappointed that we won't be getting any more of that from the series. At least for now, but probably forever given Sony's consistently waning interest in the VR space, and the string of failures that PSVR 2 keeps getting hit with. But a console release was always going to be the next logical step forward for the series, and that is undeniably exciting a prospect. There's also the plain and simple fact that it's hard not to sit up and take notice when a major new 3D console platformer comes out. Unfortunately, that is something that we see very little of in the industry. Other than Nintendo with Super Mario games, it's hard to think of many AAA platforming franchises that consistently remain in the zeitgeist, other than maybe Ratchet & Clank, which, let's face it, is more of a shooter than it is a platformer, so the fact that we're getting a full-fledged console 3D platformer from a first-party PlayStation studio feels quite significant. We're not saying Astro Bot could be Sony's Mario, but why the hell couldn't it? That, of course, is putting the cart before the horse, to say the very least, so let's bring ourselves back on topic and focus on the game at hand, which is perfectly fine with us because Astro Bot is looking absolutely delightful. From its charming and vibrant visuals to the whimsy and creativity it seems to be exhibiting with its enemies, locations, and level design based on everything that we've seen of it so far. In more ways than one, Astro Bot is looking like the dream game for fans of 3D platformers. Whether or not it's going to be able to hit the kind of quality levels that invariably get PlayStation first-party titles into Game of the Year debates at the end of the year remains to be seen, but after everything that Sony has shown so far, there's every reason to be optimistic. Hey, did you know that we at GamingBolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.